What do most Fortune 500 executives have in common? After more than 150 conversations with executives from companies like Disney, Amazon, Netflix, and Google, I've learned that sports is a common denominator. Some of our guests' athletic experiences earned them a place in their sports Hall of Fame, like Chick-fil-A Chairman Dan Cathy. Some hung up their cleats after high school, like Delta Airlines CEO Ed Bastian, while others, like Condoleezza Rice, claim they weren't that great in their sport. But no matter their skill level, they have all told me that being a part of a team taught them leadership lessons that they still use today. In partnership with Chief Executive Magazine, I'm your host, Don Yeager, here to give you an all-access pass to genuine, authentic, fireside chat-like conversations with today's business icons so that you can create powerful change in your organization. This is Corporate Competitor Podcast.
With me for today's episode is Mark Moses, founder and CEO of CEO Coaching International, a firm that has coached more than 1,200 of the world's top entrepreneurs and CEOs across 75 countries. Mark grew up in Canada, where he excelled as a competitive tennis player before transitioning to squash, where he eventually won the U.S. Squash National Championships in 1992. Today, he is a passionate endurance athlete and has completed 12 IRONMAN triathlons and even run the White Continent Marathon in Antarctica alongside his son. He was named Ernst & Young's Entrepreneur of the Year, and his work continues to transform businesses and leaders around the globe. Make sure to check out corporatecompetitorpodcast.com/notes for my favorite quotes and reflection questions to help you apply today's insights.
Look, I'm the think big guy, and I view my job as to helping anybody that I interact with be inspired to achieve more than they thought was possible. If I can do that, then I feel that I've been successful at helping them really have a breakthrough. Just think about athletics, right? I'll just go to the 4-minute mile. It's a great example of what people thought was not possible until it got done, and then it happened many times. And that is just stretching people to see and believe that they can.
Mark, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Don. It's great to be with you.
As I was studying for this podcast, one of the things that stood out to me, your company, with the coaches that you have collected, you've had the opportunity to pour into the lives of 1,200 CEOs across 75 countries. We're 2025. What are the things that CEOs today are finding most challenging? What are the things that you're hearing most often are coming up amongst these leaders?
It's probably not what you think it is, Don. You would think that today they might be talking about the economy and the challenges in the economy, which there are some. For some, over the last couple of years, it was supply chain issues. But for most people, the biggest issue that they struggle with, and it's been the same over the years, is the people they have on their team helping them achieve what they want. That has consistently been the biggest problem. And what I have learned is the people that get a business from, let's call it the early days, from A to B, are not the same people that will take the business from B to C and C to D as they continue to grow over time.
You know, Mark, in your book, Make Big Happen, you emphasize the idea that getting better results starts with asking better questions. What's one question from your own coaching and your own coaching framework that you find is particularly transformative that you could share with our listeners?
Yeah, it's not that transformative, but I think it's a great question. What do you really want?
That's the question you're asking of the applicant or of somebody that you might be looking to add to your team, asking them what they want.
Yeah, that's right. So imagine you were a prospective client of mine. I would ask you, hey, look, Don, it's 3 years from now. You are living the dream. What's the dream look like for you? Most people don't know the answer to that question. And let's assume that they do know the answer to that question. If you ask them how they're going to make that happen or how they're going to get there, they usually don't know the answer. I would say 8 times out of 10, they don't know the answer how they're going to get from A to B.
When someone doesn't know the answer, or maybe they pause or they hesitate or they struggle with that question, what does that tell you about them as a potential candidate for a role within your organization?
I would say no. I would say this is a very normal problem. When I speak to YPO groups all over the world and ask that question, I just did one recently. I asked the question, what's success 3 years from now? Most people can give you a pretty solid answer for 1 year from now, but not often for 3 years. And if you push them further onto the how, they just don't know the answer.
Wow. So that's interesting to me. You're encouraging the CEOs you're coaching to ask that question of their potential candidates. But when you ask it of some CEO leaders yourself, even some of them are struggling with it. What kind of advice are you giving folks who are struggling in that space?
I believe that if you don't know where you're going, you'll never get there. It's gaining clarity around where it is that they are going. I'll give you an example. I like the concept of adding a zero. So let's just say somebody's got an $80 million business, 80 million in revenue. If you add a zero to that, that's 800 million. I'll then ask folks, is over a period of 10 years, adding a zero, or also known as growing 10x, is that a big number in terms of growth rate, or a small number? And most people will go, wow, 80 to 800, which is no different than 8 to 80. Is that a big number? That's a real big number. It's only 26.7% year over year growth for 10 years. And I'll use the only term loosely because that sounds like a pretty good number, especially compounded over 10 years. But it's not 50% or 100%. It's not a crazy number. It's a number that's achievable. So once they see that, they begin to recognize what's possible.
And obviously the power in coaching is in the ability to help them gain clarity and see what's possible.
Look, I'm the think big guy, and I view my job as to helping anybody that interact with be inspired to achieve more than they thought was possible. If I can do that, then I feel that I've been successful at helping them really have a breakthrough. You just think about athletics, right? I'll just go to the 4-minute mile. It's a great example of what people thought was not possible until it got done, and then it happened many times.
Right.
Which is, and that is just stretching people to see and believe that they can.
In your book, you also have one of the things I loved about your book was you have the make big happen questions, right? The 4 big questions. The one that I really thought was interesting, because I don't think people think enough in this space, is your third question, which is what could get in the way? It's when you start to actually ask yourself those things that could derail you. What is the what could get in the way answer that you hear most frequently these days?
It's really failing to execute, failing to do what we said we would do. There was a client of mine who said he wanted to do $70 million in new business next year. And I asked him, what are the specific and measurable activities you will keep score on that'll drive that outcome? And he said, prospect meetings. I said, how many? He said, 400. Me and my team do 400 prospect meetings over the next year. We'll drive that outcome of $70 million based on our historical conversion rate and average size of the deal that we do. What are the specific and measurable activities that will drive you to get 400 prospect meetings? He said, that's a good question. 2,000 people come to the seminars I put on and listen to me. If I get 2,000 people to come, I'll convert 20% of them to prospect meetings, and that's how I get my 400. Then, all right, you're a handsome guy, but you're getting 2,000 people to come and listen to you. How are you going to do that? What are the activities that are going to drive that outcome? And he said 21,000 phone calls to employees of people that work at engineering firms in Kansas City. Wow, that's pretty specific. For my first question was, are there that many? He said, don't worry, there's way more than that many that work for engineering firms, Kansas City. The root of the issue was ensuring that we make these 21,000 phone calls. So in that year, he made his 21,000 phone calls and fall through the whole funnel. He did $84 million in new business, which was meaningfully more than the $70 million he set out to do. So what I find, it's typically not the economy. It's, do we have a plan? And are we following the plan? Are we doing what we said we would do as it relates to driving that outcome that we really wanted?
You know what I love about that client and the way you were working backwards on the questions. I love that the client had answers. I think most people might struggle to be able to be as connected to their numbers as your client was there.
He had the first answer, the 400, and I went quickly there with you. I had to help him develop what do we need to do to get the 2,000 people to show up. That's where a coach can help ask the questions, keep asking the questions till you get to the real root activity. And in this case, the root activity was making the phone calls. And you can say, well, having the people to make the phone calls and then dividing by the number of days in the year, excluding Saturdays and Sundays, excluding holidays, excluding time when people might get sick. How many calls do I need to make to ultimately achieve that outcome? I want to give you an example with athletics. I know you and I are both very passionate about that. In the world of Ironman, 12 hours is kind of the number that everybody, beyond finishing an Ironman, people should, can I do an Ironman 12 hours? So I'm a pretty good athlete if I do it in 12. So I did it in 11:55. I did one in, then I did another one in 11:43. I did another one in 11:37. I would like to do one under 11 hours. So if I go under 11 hours, I'm a pretty good athlete. And what we did was with my coach, we worked backwards and said, what do I need to swim at, ride at, and run at to achieve that outcome? So we worked backwards and worked our training backwards to achieve this. And I ended up doing the race. It was at Ironman Arizona at 10 hours and 56 minutes.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I wanted to test it on myself. Will this work can I apply this to athletics and see if it will work too? And as a matter of fact, I needed to run the marathon in 4 hours or slightly under. I needed to ride the bike at 20 miles an hour. I had ridden the bike at 20.1 miles per hour, and I swam a little bit faster than I thought. And despite running the marathon in 4:01, I still got to 10:56, which is the power of just building your plan around what's my goal and what do I need to do specifically, and then practice at it and train at it to make sure that under pressure, you still can.
Wow. Love it. So speaking of athletics, Mark, you grew up in Sudbury, a small mining community in Canada. You're playing tennis, but later you took up squash in your 20s. Now, I don't know if there's anything you do in your life that you don't try to do at the highest level. I think this is pretty awesome, but you pick up squash and then you go on to win the U.S. National Championship in 1992. Is there a memory from one of those early athletic experiences, a challenge, some way that you had to overcome, something you had to overcome that you still think about today?
I totally do. And that's a really cool question. And I don't know that you know this, but I was the last guy cut from my college squash team. And I did not make the team in college. Now, I didn't play the sport seriously then, but I did give it a good try, trying out for the team. When I left Canada and moved to California, there were squash courts at this new gym, and I started playing. I started playing every day. And I remember asking this guy named Bart if he would play with me, and he asked me if I thought I could play at his level. I said, I'm not sure, but I'm going to give it a solid try, and let's play together. He said, son, when you think you can play at my level, you come back and talk to me. And it really got me fired up. I hired an awesome coach, and then went on, played a bunch of tournaments, and ultimately, as an unseeded guy, won that national championship. And it was really fun. The guy that had cut me from the squash team went on and was running the alumni association at college. And one day reached out to me, and just as he was raising money and checking in with former alums or former students at school, we had a little check-in, and I said, I don't know if you remember me, but you cut me from the squash team, and let me just give you a little bit of an update on what's happened with my squash career.
One of the things that I've discovered over a lifetime of studying high performers, especially in my world sports, is how many of them have a chip on their shoulder, have a little something like getting cut. Tom Brady can give you the statistics of all the quarterbacks chosen in the draft ahead of him, right? Sometimes the chip really works. So you get cut, but then it was Bart who also said, but maybe one day you can be worthy. How do you positively use that chip? And how do you encourage others to do the same?
I like to go into every race prepared and know in advance what I believe the outcome will be, because I did the preparation in advance. So I know, and look, a lot of stuff can happen in a race that can take you sideways, but I know that if I do the work, that I've increased my odds of achieving that, and I never give up. And I don't always win, but I always feel that I'm prepared and I can give it my best shot. Now, you also asked, how do I help others? And that is ultimately believing that they can. I've always been very motivated by Henry Ford's saying or quote where he said, if you believe you can or you can't, you're right. And it reminds me of, I remember one day my daughter, who was doing crew in high school, and she said one day, hey, Dad, I'm going to place, I and our team are going to place second in the regatta today. That's kind of an unusual thing to say, and an unusual thing to say that is a guy that always strives to place first. And I said, well, okay, good on you. Good luck today, and good luck with second. He goes, Dad, that's not the answer I expected from you. I expected you would say, and she went on a rant about that I would expect her to be number one, and that I didn't understand how this team was better than theirs. And it was like, okay, whatever you believe, okay, it's all good. And I said, but if you're asking, how about just this one day, you inspire your girls to today, on this day, for these about 3 minutes, we are going to work harder together than we've ever worked today. And today we're going to win. It's unbelievable. The power of believing that you can, it can trump a lot of the other stuff.
Wow, that's awesome. And again, what if you say, I think we're going to finish second?
You probably will.
Right. You're destining yourself. You had a great quote that I read in a document where you said, you talked a lot about playing sports, and you said, keep playing sports because they teach you a lot about yourself and others. What did you mean by that?
So I think sports teach you, first thing I think it teaches you is discipline. When I was a kid, my brother and I used to get up at 6 a.m. every day, 6 days a week. My parents didn't get up with us. They sent us in a taxi to the tennis club where we played tennis every day, 6 days a week before we went to school. That discipline every single day was amazing. Then we played after school, and then we played on Sundays as well. And it was that, I think discipline teaches you a lot. And it teaches you a lot when you got to get up in the morning, and some days you're tired or you don't feel like it, and you put one foot in front of the other and you just do it. All the sports that I played that weren't for fun, that I played competitively, were individual sports. But I have seen, I guess I coached water polo at one time, and we won a gold and a bronze in our city. But it was about playing together. We win together, we lose together, but we can't do it individually. It has to be done as part of a team. And it's amazing that the outcome that you can have when people work together and all are chasing that same dream, and not like some athletes that don't play well with others, don't play well on the team.
It's so funny that often when you're talking about, when I talk about sports, people are like, oh, I'm so over sports lessons, sports stories. Are you kidding me? They are so completely relevant into everything we're trying to achieve.
I agree with you. And it really does apply to business and getting a team together, discussing the annual goals. It's really interesting. Is that a top-down issue? CEO or the board decides what the goals are, and then the team now needs to execute those goals. But if you don't go through a process where you get buy-in and alignment with the team, there's a much higher probability that it won't happen. This process of going through, how did we do compared to how we said we would do? What went right last year or last quarter? What went wrong? What did we learn about ourselves in executing over the last year or quarter? And where do we want to be by the end of next quarter or next year? And what are the activities that we're going to measure that will drive that outcome?
And again, you're breaking the big goal down, the big rock down into small rocks, right? And then everybody's deciding which rock you're going to carry.
Absolutely. There's a clear, everybody owns something. Not one person can own everything. And additionally, I also believe that two people don't own one goal, or worse, 3, 4 people own a goal. It's down to an individual, one throat to choke.
Wow. Love it. I want to stick to athletics a little bit more with you because there's one thing you did that just blows me away. You competed in your first Ironman to honor your son, Mason, and the hospital team that saved his life. Such a fantastic story. Can you share it with our listeners?
Sure. That was a really tough time in our lives where you go through all that uncertainty and a couple of emergency brain surgeries with a 50-50 chance of living and then getting to the other side of that.
He'd been diagnosed with a brain tumor, correct?
That's right. And it all happened so fast, from suffering with headaches and vomiting to then going in for an MRI, then straight into the ambulance and straight to the children's hospital, and then waiting for a surgeon to tell us what the outcome was going to be. And I remember when the surgeon finally arrived at 11 o'clock at night, and he just looked tired to me. And I said, what's the plan here? And he said, hey, you know what? I'm quite tired today. Would it be okay if we wait until tomorrow? I said, hey, man, if we're doing brain surgery, I think you should be rested. There's no damage waiting till tomorrow. I think you should go home and get a good night's sleep. And that's exactly what we did. But as it relates to the hospital, the Children's Hospital of Orange County was amazing in how they dealt with our son, how they dealt with my wife and me, and then walking us through the whole process. I ended up joining the board over there as a grateful parent. And then I wanted to help them raise money. And my target was just $100,000 that I wanted to raise. It was a long time ago when $100,000 was a lot of money. And we ended up raising $140,000. It was so rewarding because that at the race, my wife, my kids, my in-laws wore these really cool shirts and in honoring our son. And I raced in one in honoring our son for surviving this. It's really awesome to be able to do something really meaningful for the hospital while honoring my son for beating brain tumor, brain cancer, third ventriculostomy, which is water on the brain. It was extremely rewarding.
Tell me about the finish line. The finish line is just such that you're getting a little emotional here, but please, this is so powerful.
It was my first time. When you do it the first time, you believe that you're going to be able to complete it. You go in believing that you can. There's a little bit of doubt though, because you've never done it before. You've never in training, you never do the whole race in training. So you got a little bit of doubt. And as you're approaching the end, and look, the run on my first marathon, it was tough. I expect to be running a lot more and ended up walking a lot more than I thought. And it was pretty humbling. And at the time you got people they would put your age on the back of your calf. When you're 40-ish and you got somebody at 64 passing you, you're going, oh man, it's humbling. But as you approach the finish line, it was so emotional. I know I'm going to see my kids. I know that we had planned to run across the finish line together. And I started getting choked up about a mile before the finish line, like really emotional, like tears running down my face. And then it was incredibly emotional holding my two kids' hands, running across that finish line. Our son then was 5 and our daughter was 6. And it was beautiful. So I cried like a little girl and it was awesome.
I got tears in my eyes listening to you. So you went on, you've done other Ironmans, you run many marathons. What business lessons do you learn from these competitions?
Man, the first one I would say, it goes back to that lesson. If you believe you can or you can't, you're right. You can achieve anything you want in life if you believe in yourself. I'd like to also say that there are 3 kinds of people: those that make big happen, those that let things happen, and those that ask, what happened? Who do you want to be? And so those are the few that come to mind.
You know, Mark, one of the things that has stood out to me about what you do and the way you lead CEOs and help them is the ability to bring them together. You do an amazing summit called Making Big Happen. Tell me, what's the value of putting all these leaders together?
Yeah, it is totally energizing to bring all these leaders together. We usually get between 500 and 600 CEOs and members of their leadership team from all over the world come to this event, and they leave inspired. So years ago, 2019, I had President George W. Bush come to the event and had an opportunity to interview him for an hour in front of the audience and ask him any question that I wanted. It was just really inspiring to have the former president of the United States in the room with us for that. And then folks that wanted to get their photo taken with him could do that too. The one we had 2 years ago, we had Jesse Itzler, and Jesse Itzler was amazing when he was talking about the first time he ran a 100-mile race. He had this mantra where the guy he was running with was, "Hey, Jesse, how you feeling?" And he'd go, "I'm outstanding." "How you feeling, Jesse?" "I don't quit." "Jesse, how you?" And it was amazing. He walked us through this and it was so inspiring. So at this Make Big Happen Summit, we bring some amazing people to the event. For example, this year we have Jim Collins, who wrote Good to Great by Choice, Built to Last, How the Mighty Fall. We have 2 of the top Harvard professors on leadership and negotiation out there. And then we have tracks for folks to learn about whatever they want, from AI, because there's a lot to be learned about AI at the moment, their own health and longevity, growing their business, building their own annual plan. They get to choose what they want. So that's just a little soundbite on the Make Big Happen Summit that we do annually. Love to have you come sometime and share your story with our audience, because you got a great story too, Don.
You once rode an 8,000-pound elephant into a meeting to inspire your employees. We can't end today's conversation without talking about that. So what inspired that bold move, and how do you encourage leaders to instill that culture of audacious thinking?
This was in 1997. I had just gone through a really difficult time in my business, and I wanted to inspire our employees to really think big. So I said to my assistant, "Hey, I'd like you to find me a marching band. I'd like you to tear a wall down in the building. It's okay, we can put it back up. And find me an elephant. I'd like to ride this elephant down the street in Irvine, California, and into the annual meeting." And the message was, if you think big and act big, you will be big. And that was the day I announced that together we will do $1 billion. And it was amazing. They were laughing, they were crying. They were like, "Oh my God, this is just nuts to have an 8,000-pound elephant inside an office building and this young CEO dressed in a suit and tie on top of it. This is absolutely nuts." But it was amazing, the power of that. The next day, people started bringing in little stuffed elephants, crystal elephants, ceramic elephants, and putting them on their desk and they were saying, "Hey man, that was weird and crazy and fun, but we're with you. Together, we're going to think big and do this." And look, this was in 1997. It took till 2005 where we reached $1 billion. And in 2006, we did 1.6 billion. So the power of this visualization or this moment or experience for everybody as it relates to thinking big and together we're going to do this, got everybody bought into let's do this. And we did.
So if you're coaching a leader that's trying to get his or her employees to think bigger, what would your advice to them be?
Yeah, in order to get your team to really, let's say, row the boat with you, what is it that you can do that'll really cement this image or moment to get your team bought into where it is that we're going to row together? And those that can do that and get their team to buy into that will achieve outcomes beyond anything they ever dreamed about.
Mark, thanks so much for this conversation. You are an absolute gem of a leader and a teacher and a coach. Thanks so much for being with us. Thanks for being a corporate competitor with us today.
Well, Don, thanks for having me. I enjoyed being with you today. It was fun, and I love how prepared you were, and I love your great questions. Thank you.
Wow. Mark Moses I can see why he is a coach to so many great leaders. I felt like I was coached by him today. But there were 3 amazing takeaways for me, 3 things that I'm going to share with you. I will be better because I learned them today. The first was the importance of hyperfocus. And if you're going to do that within your organization, within yourself, the real key is breaking big goals down into small pieces, right? It doesn't do you any good to have a big goal if you can't create manageable pieces that you can then use to hold yourself accountable. Most people talk about at the beginning of the year, I'm going to make $1 million or whatever it might be, a 10 million, 100 million, whatever the number might be. But what they haven't done is say, okay, to make $1 million, these are the number of phone calls I need to make. And if that's the number of phone calls I need to make, here's how many have to be done every day. And here's break your goals down in a way that allow you to draw a map that tells you what it's going to take to get you there. The next one of those lessons for me came from his 5 elements of a high-performing team Mark shares on his website, where he talks about the importance of asking executives when he's talking to them about their team. Tell me about Leonard, right? He would say. And the executive sometimes might say, well, Leonard's a really nice guy and he's not really doing as well. And he'd make a real point to the executive, hey, by the way, nice guy isn't a profession. If you want to achieve big goals, make sure that everybody on your team is not there just because they're a nice guy, nice woman, nice person. What you want are people who are similarly driven, people who have the desire to achieve as you do. It's imperative, though, for you to be able to know your team members and know what makes it, what wires them, what fires them up in order to be successful in that way. But lastly, the takeaway the visual, I cannot get it out of my mind, was when he talked about the importance of how he gets his team to think big. And to do that, one time, he rode into a meeting on an 8,000-pound elephant because he wanted to make sure they realized that in his mind, they weren't thinking big enough. And so he did something big to get them to think big. And his advice to leaders is if you want others to think big, you need to go out there and maybe make it real for them. The elephant became a mascot for them, right? And people started getting little ceramic elephants, putting them on their desk. But it was a reminder to think big. I'm thinking bigger because I had this time with Mark Moses. I hope you will too. I appreciate you.
If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a rating and review on Apple and Spotify. Feedback helps us spread the insights of our guests to a wider audience. It actually increases our ratings. Thank you so much for those who have done so in the past. And catch new episodes every Wednesday. Subscribe at corporatecompetitorpodcast.com to be the first to get a chance to listen. And as a thank you gift, I will send you a chapter from one of my best-selling books. Stay connected with me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. My handle is @DonYaeger, DonYaeger. And until next week, I appreciate you.